Stop! It's a trap!
Get lost, kid.
The bridge, they cut it last night.
You're crazy. Move.
Please, I watched them do it. 3 men with an angle grounder. You cross that bridge, none of you come back.
The biker shoved past her. 15 engines roared to life.
Hope Gardner dropped to her knees in the middle of the parking lot. Barefoot, homeless, 19 years old. She had nothing. No phone, no family, no voice that mattered. She'd run 2 miles at dawn on an empty stomach to save 15 strangers, and not one of them believed her. She whispered to herself, the way her grandmother taught her to pray. At the back of the pack, one man's eyes narrowed. He looked at her, really looked. Then he killed his engine. What happened after that? This town has never been the same. Unbelievable. To understand why she was out there barefoot, begging strangers, we got to go back to the beginning. 14 months ago, Hope Gardner had a home. It wasn't much, a narrow clapboard house on Birch Lane with a leaking roof and a porch swing that squeaked every time the wind blew. But it smelled like cinnamon and lavender, because that's what Eleanor Gardner's kitchen always smelled like. Eleanor was Hope's grandmother, the only family she had left. Her mother vanished when Hope was 3, just walked out one morning and never came back. Her father was a name on a birth certificate she'd never seen. Eleanor raised her on Social Security checks and a stubborn belief that kindness was the only currency that never lost its value. "You read that book twice already," Eleanor would say, watching Hope curl up on the couch with a dog-eared copy of something borrowed from the county library. "Third time," Hope would answer. "It gets better every time." Eleanor laughed at that. Every single time. Then came the cough, the one that didn't stop. The doctor in the next town said pneumonia, said Eleanor needed to stay in the hospital. Eleanor said she couldn't afford it. The doctor said she couldn't afford not to. She died on a Tuesday morning in November. Hope was holding her hand. The heart monitor flattened into a single tone, and the nurse had to pry Hope's fingers loose because she wouldn't let go. The bank took the house 60 days later. Unpaid mortgage. Eleanor had been behind for years, stretching every dollar so thin it was practically transparent. Hope stood on the sidewalk and watched a man in a gray suit change the locks. He didn't look at her once. She tried the shelter in Colton, 20 miles south. Full. She tried the church on 5th Street. Pastor Lewis said he'd pray for her. Prayers don't keep the rain off your back. So Hope found the bridge. The Millbrook Bridge was old, built in the 1960s, barely used since the highway bypass went in. Underneath, the concrete embankment formed a shallow alcove, just wide enough for a sleeping bag and a milk crate full of books. Hope dragged a sheet of corrugated tin over the opening to block the wind. It wasn't a home, but it was hers. Grayville had about 4,000 people. Most of them knew Hope existed. None of them did anything about it. The woman who ran the grocery store on Main Street, Mrs. Calloway, once chased Hope out with a broom when she came inside to warm up during a rainstorm. "You're scaring my customers," she said. Hope was standing by the canned soup aisle, dripping water on the floor and shivering. Officer Braddock, the police chief, told her twice that if she didn't stop loitering near the businesses, he'd have her arrested for vagrancy. He said it the way you'd talk to a stray dog you were tired of seeing. The only person in Grayville who treated Hope like a human being was Earl Weston. He was 71 years old, ran a one-man auto repair shop at the edge of town, and had hands like leather gloves. Every few days, Earl would leave a brown paper bag on the railing of the Millbrook Bridge, a ham sandwich, an apple, sometimes a bottle of water. He never made a big deal about it, never asked for a thank you. He'd just nod if he saw her and keep walking. Once, he left a flashlight with a note taped to it. "For your books." Hope kept that flashlight under her pillow every night. It was the most valuable thing she owned. She was 19 years old, sleeping under a bridge in a town that wished she'd disappear. And tonight, she'd witnessed 3 men try to engineer a mass murder. The question was simple. Who do you tell when nobody listens to you? They came in like thunder. 15 Harley-Davidsons rolling down Route 9 in a tight V formation. Chrome catching the morning sun, exhaust pipes rumbling low enough to rattle the windows of every shop on Main Street. The sound reached Grayville before the riders did. A deep, rolling growl that made people stop on the sidewalk and stare. The Iron Oath Brotherhood. 15 men, all veterans. They'd served in different wars, different branches, different decades. But they rode together every summer. A 3-week trip across the South, visiting memorials, laying wreaths, pouring whiskey on headstones of friends who didn't make it home. This year's route ran from Savannah to Memphis, and Grayville was nothing more than a fuel stop and a bathroom break. Hank Sullivan rode at the front. 52 years old, former Marine, 2 tours in Afghanistan. He had a silver beard trimmed close, deep lines around his eyes, and a voice that didn't need volume to carry authority. His leather vest was covered in patches, unit insignias, memorial pins, a small American flag stitched over his heart. Behind him rode Craig Dawson, the loudest of the group. Ex-Army, built like a refrigerator, with a handlebar mustache and an opinion about everything. Craig was the kind of man who filled silence the way water fills a crack, aggressively and without invitation. Then there was Sam Porter. Quiet, thin, former Navy engineer who'd spent 20 years building things the government wouldn't talk about. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and carried a pocket notebook everywhere. The other riders called him the Professor. Sam noticed things other people missed. Behind Sam rode Danny Wells, 26, the youngest in the group. Former combat medic, 2 Purple Hearts, a laugh that came easy and a temper that didn't. Danny carried a first aid kit on his bike the way other riders carried beer. Next to him was Vic Holloway, a retired drill sergeant who hadn't raised his voice in 11 years and didn't plan to start. Vic communicated mostly through nods and silence, and both were more effective than most people's speeches. The rest of the pack filled in behind. Men with road-worn faces and steady hands. A welder from Tallahassee. A high school teacher from Mobile. A retired firefighter who still flinched at the sound of sirens. Each one carried a story he didn't talk about and a loyalty he never had to explain. They weren't a gang. They were a family built from wreckage. Grayville didn't see it that way. When the 15 bikes pulled into Conley's gas station, Mrs. Calloway locked the front door of her grocery store. Pastor Lewis watched from his office window with his arms crossed. 2 mothers pulled their children closer on the sidewalk, as if leather jackets were contagious. "Lovely welcome," Craig muttered, swinging off his bike and stretching his back. "We're not here for the welcome," Hank said. He pulled a folded map from his saddlebag and spread it across the seat of his Harley. His finger traced a line south of town. "Millbrook Bridge. We crossed there, cut through the valley, save 2 hours before Memphis." "Bridge any good?" Sam asked, leaning in. "County map says it's open. Should be fine." Across the street, standing in the shadow of a boarded-up laundromat, Hope Gardner watched. She'd been following the sound of the engines since they entered town, and now she stood frozen, her pulse climbing. 15 bikes. Route 9. The bridge. This was them. The men Wade Thornton wanted dead. She looked at their faces, weathered, laughing, alive. Craig was making a joke about gas station coffee. A younger rider was showing photos on his phone to the man next to him. Hank was studying his map with the calm focus of someone who'd navigated far worse terrain than a Georgia back road. They had no idea. Hope's hands clenched at her sides. Her mouth went dry. Every instinct told her to run, not away, but toward them, to scream, to grab the map and tear it up, to do something, anything, before those 15 motorcycles rolled onto a bridge that couldn't hold a bicycle. But another voice, the voice of Grayville, the voice of every person who'd ever looked through her like glass, whispered something else. They won't believe you. They never do. She thought about Earl's flashlight, about Eleanor's voice saying the same thing every night before bed. Do the right thing, baby, even when it costs you. Hope stepped out of the shadow and started walking toward the gas station. She had no proof, no phone, no credibility, just the truth and 2 bare feet on hot asphalt. It would have to be enough. She reached the gas station in under a minute, but it felt like crossing a minefield. Every step brought her closer to 15 strangers and further from the only safety she understood. Silence. Invisibility. The comfort of being no one. Hope stopped at the edge of the parking lot. The bikers were clustered near the fuel pumps, checking tire pressure, passing around bottles of water, laughing about something Craig had said. They were loud, relaxed, completely unaware. She took a breath. Then she walked straight into the middle of them. You can't take that bridge. Craig turned first. He looked her up and down. The matted hair, the oversized jacket with a torn sleeve, the bare feet black with road dust. His lip curled. Excuse me? The Millbrook Bridge, on Route 9. 3 men cut the support beams last night with an angle grinder. I watched them do it. If you ride across, the whole thing collapses. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Craig laughed. Not a kind laugh, the sharp, dismissive kind that's designed to make someone feel small. Lady, I don't know what you're on, but I'm not on anything. Hope's voice cracked, but she held her ground. I sleep under that bridge. I was there. I heard them talking. The guy who planned it. His name is Wade Thornton. He owns the bar on Creston Avenue. He said 15 bikes at full speed, and the bridge wouldn't hold past the first 3. Craig shook his head. Tommy, you know this girl? Tommy Conley, the gas station attendant, leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed. That's the homeless one. Lives under the bridge. She's not all there, if you know what I mean. I'm standing right here, Hope said quietly. Sweetheart. Craig stepped closer, towering over her. We've been riding for 6 days. We've got a memorial to get to in Memphis. I'm not rerouting because some kid who sleeps in the dirt had a bad dream. A few bikers shifted uncomfortably. One rubbed the back of his neck, but nobody spoke up. Hope felt the heat rising behind her eyes. Not anger, something worse. The familiar sting of being dismissed, of being looked at and not seen. She'd felt it at the grocery store, at the shelter, at the police station, at every door that closed before she could finish a sentence. I'm not lying, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper now. I have no reason to lie. I have nothing. I'm telling you what I saw because people are going to die, and I can't. Her voice broke. She pressed her palm against her mouth and looked at the ground. Craig waved his hand. All right, show's over. Let's gas up and roll. The engines started again. One by one, the bikes rumbled to life. The formation was reassembling. In 90 seconds, they'd be on Route 9, and 7 minutes after that, they'd reach the Millbrook Bridge. Hope didn't move. She stood in the parking lot with her arms at her sides and tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. Then a voice cut through the noise. Hold up! Hank Sullivan had been leaning against his bike the entire time, arms folded, watching. Not Hope. Her eyes. He'd spent 2 decades reading people in situations where a wrong judgment meant someone went home in a bag. He knew what panic looked like. He knew what deception looked like. And he knew the difference. This girl wasn't performing. She was terrified. "Everybody shut your engines off," Hank said. It wasn't a request. Craig frowned. "Hank, come on. I said shut them off." 14 engines died. The parking lot went quiet. Hank walked over to Hope. He didn't crouch down, didn't soften his voice. He spoke to her the way you speak to someone you're taking seriously. "What's your name?" "Hope. Hope Gardner." "Hope, I'm Hank. You said 3 men, last night, angle grinder on the support beams." "Which beams?" "East side, the 4 middle ones. They cut deep, maybe 80% through. From above, you can't tell." Hank looked at Sam. Sam was already pulling his glasses off and cleaning them. His tell for when something had grabbed his full attention. "Sam, grab your toolkit. Craig, you're coming too." Hank turned back to Hope. "Show us." "Nah, this is crazy. Imagine you got no shoes, no food, no one, and you're begging strangers to let you save their lives. And they laugh at you. Picture yourself standing there. Would you keep going? Or would you just walk away?" Yeah. Think about that. Hope led them down the gravel path that ran along Miller Creek, the same path she walked every night to reach her spot under the bridge. Hank followed 2 steps behind. Sam carried a canvas toolkit over his shoulder. Craig trailed at the back, arms crossed, mouth set in a hard line. "How far?" Hank asked. "1/4 mile, around the bend." Nobody spoke after that. Just the crunch of gravel underfoot and the slow murmur of the creek. When the Millbrook Bridge came into view, it looked exactly the way it always did. Old, rust-streaked, unremarkable. 2 lanes wide, steel girder construction, built sometime in the Kennedy administration. The kind of bridge you'd drive over 1,000 times without thinking about it. Craig snorted. "Looks fine to me." "It's not on top," Hope said. She pointed to the east side, where the embankment sloped down toward the water. "Underneath, the support beams." Hank didn't hesitate. He climbed down the embankment, his boots sinking into the soft mud at the creek's edge. He ducked under the bridge deck and looked up. For 3 seconds, he didn't move. "Sam, get down here, now!" Sam scrambled down the slope, nearly losing his footing on the wet grass. He pulled a flashlight from his kit and aimed it at the first crossbeam. The cut was clean, surgical almost. A deep diagonal slash through the steel, made with an industrial angle grinder, the kind you could rent from any hardware store for $40 a day. The metal around the cut was still bright, not yet oxidized. Fresh. Sam moved the light to the next beam. Same cut. Then the 3rd. Then the 4th. 4 out of 6 support beams on the east side, each cut approximately 80% through. Just enough steel left to hold the bridge's own weight. But add 15 motorcycles, each one carrying 200 pounds of rider plus 300 pounds of machine, and the math was catastrophic. "These cuts are less than 12 hours old," Sam said. His voice had gone flat, the way engineers talk when numbers stop being abstract. The oxidation pattern, the sharpness of the kerf. This was done last night, exactly like she said. Craig had come down the embankment by now. He stood behind Sam, staring at the cuts, his jaw slowly falling open. That's not weathering," he said. "That's deliberate." 4 beams at 80% depth. Sam pulled out his pocket notebook and started scribbling. "At full load, 15 bikes, highway speed. This bridge fails in under 2 seconds. The deck drops, the bikes go with it. 30-foot fall into shallow water over rocks." He paused. "Nobody survives that." The silence that followed was the loudest sound Hope had ever heard. Hank climbed back up the embankment. His face was white. Not scared, furious. A controlled, quiet fury that Hope recognized from Eleanor's stories about men who'd been to war. The kind of anger that doesn't shout, it calculates. He looked at Hope, really looked at her, the same way he'd looked at her in the parking lot, but different now. Now there was something else behind his eyes. "You saved our lives," he said. Hope didn't know what to do with that. Nobody had ever said anything like it to her before. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. So she just stood there, barefoot in the mud, and nodded. Craig walked up to her. He stopped, swallowed hard. Then he pulled off his leather riding gloves and held them out to her. "I'm sorry," he said, "for what I said back there." Hope looked at the gloves, looked at Craig. She took them. It was the first gift anyone had given her since Earl's flashlight. Hank called the police first. It was the obvious move, the correct move, and it was a mistake. Chief Roy Braddock arrived at the bridge 20 minutes later in his department-issue SUV, coffee in hand, sunglasses on, moving at the pace of a man who'd been mildly inconvenienced. He climbed out, hitched his belt, and looked at the bridge the way you'd look at a pothole someone was overreacting about.
"So what are we dealing with here?" Braddock asked. Hank pointed underneath. 4 support beams cut with an angle grinder. Deliberate sabotage. This bridge was set to collapse under our convoy. Braddock crouched near the embankment, but didn't go down. He glanced underneath for maybe 5 seconds, then stood up and brushed off his knees. "Looks like normal wear and tear to me," he said. "Bridge is 60 years old. Steel fatigues." Sam stepped forward. "Chief, I'm a structural engineer, retired Navy. I've inspected hundreds of bridges on 3 continents. Those cuts are machine-made, less than 12 hours old. The kerf angle is consistent with a 4-inch angle grinder, operating at approximately 11,000 revolutions per minute. Steel doesn't fatigue in diagonal lines with polished edges." Braddock stared at Sam, the way a man stares at a menu he can't read.
"I appreciate your expertise, sir, but I've been chief in this town for 19 years. I know this bridge." "Then you know it was fine last week," Hope said from behind them. Braddock's eyes flicked to Hope. Something shifted in his face. Not surprise, but recognition. The kind of look a man gives when a variable he thought he'd accounted for shows up in the wrong place. "Miss Gardner, this isn't your concern. I live under this bridge. I walked across it 3 days ago. It was solid. Now 4 beams are cut 80% through, and you're calling it wear and tear?" Braddock removed his sunglasses. His eyes were flat. "I'm going to have the county inspector take a look next week. Until then, I'll put up a road closed sign. That satisfy everyone?" "Next week?" Craig said. "Someone tried to kill us tonight, and you want to schedule an appointment?" "Nobody tried to kill anyone. You've got a homeless girl with a story, and a retired engineer with a theory. That's not a crime scene. That's a disagreement about infrastructure." Braddock put his sunglasses back on. "I suggest you folks find an alternate route to Memphis." He turned and walked back to his SUV. Hank watched him go. Then he turned to Sam and said one word. "Camera." Sam had been recording on his phone since they arrived at the bridge. Every cut, every beam, every angle, documented from multiple positions with timestamps. He nodded. Got it all. Good. Hank pulled out his own phone. Because that man didn't investigate anything. He didn't take photos, didn't take a statement, didn't go under the bridge. And he knew Hope's last name without anyone introducing her. The silence hit like a slap. Craig's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the SUV disappearing down Route 9, then back at Hank. "He's in on it," Craig said. "At minimum, he knows about it," Hank said. "Hope, the man you saw last night? Wade Thornton. What's his connection to Braddock?" "They drink together," Hope said. "Every Thursday at the Iron Mule. Wade's bar." Sometimes Braddock's cruiser is parked out back until 2 in the morning. Hank nodded slowly. He looked at Sam. We're not calling local law enforcement again. Give me the number for the nearest FBI field office. Albany, Sam said, already scrolling his phone. 45 minutes south. Call them. Tell them we have documented evidence of attempted murder and the compromised police chief. Hank paused. And tell them to bring someone who actually looks at evidence.
Hope stood at the edge of the group, watching 15 men shift from road-weary travelers into something else entirely. Something organized. Something sharp. She'd seen Wade's plan. Now she was watching Hank build one. 15 motorcycles parked in a line outside the Iron Mule at noon. The engines cut simultaneously. A wall of silence that hit the street like a held breath.
Wade Thornton was behind the bar when the front door opened. He looked up and saw Hank Sullivan walk in, followed by 14 men in leather vests and road dust, fanning out across the room like they'd rehearsed it. 2 covered the back exit. 2 stayed by the front door. The rest formed a loose semicircle around the bar. Wade's hand froze on the glass he was polishing. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" His voice was steady, but his eyes moved to the back door. Blocked. "Wade Thornton?" Hank said.
Who's asking?
"The 15 men you tried to kill last night." The glass slipped. Wade caught it before it hit the bar, but the flinch told the whole story. A man who didn't know what Hank was talking about would have been confused. Wade was scared. "I don't know what you're—" "Millbrook Bridge, east side. 4 beams cut with an angle grinder between 11:40 and 12:20 last night. Your red Dodge Ram parked 50 yards up Route 9 with the headlights off. You told your men, and I'm quoting a witness, 15 bikes, full speed. This bridge won't hold past the first 3. Wade's face went gray. Not white, gray. The color of a man watching every exit close at once. Whoever told you that is lying. I was here all night. Ask anyone." "We will," Hank said. "The FBI will too. They're on their way." The word FBI landed like a brick through a window. Wade's composure cracked, just for a second, but everyone in the room saw it. His eyes darted to the office behind the bar. "Sam," Hank said calmly, "back office." Sam moved past the bar and pushed open the office door. Inside, a metal trash can was smoldering, papers curling black at the edges. Sam pulled the can away from the desk and stomped out the flames. "Burning documents," Sam called out. "Looks like receipts, equipment rental forms, and, yeah, a printed map of Route 9 with the bridge circled in red marker." Wade lunged for the back exit. 3 bikers stepped into his path, not grabbing, not hitting, just standing. A wall of denim and leather and absolute calm. "Sit down, Wade," Hank said. Wade didn't sit. He stood in the middle of his own bar, breathing hard, looking from face to face for any crack in the formation. There was none. "You don't understand," Wade said. His voice had changed, higher, thinner, the bravado gone. "The bar's going under. I owe $60,000 to people who don't take monthly payments. You needed our wallets," Craig said. "So you rigged a bridge to collapse and planned to pick through the wreckage." "I wasn't going to. Nobody was supposed to die." Sam held up the map. 30-foot drop onto rocks in shallow water. 15 riders. You did the math, Wade. You just didn't care about the answer. The front door opened again. This time, it was Braddock. The police chief walked in with his hand on his belt, chest puffed, jaw set. The posture of a man about to take control of a room. Then he saw 15 bikers staring at him, and Wade standing in the middle of the floor, pale and cornered. "Roy," Wade said. "Just the name." just enough. "Chief Braddock," Hank said. "Glad you could join us. We've got your friend here attempting to destroy evidence, and we've got you on video from this morning declining to investigate a documented crime scene. Care to explain that?" Braddock's hand dropped from his belt. Outside, the sound of tires on gravel. 2 black SUVs pulling up to the curb. Federal plates. "That would be the FBI," Sam said, checking his watch. "Right on time." The agents came through the door with badges out and voices low. Professional. Efficient. They separated Wade and Braddock immediately. Different corners of the room, different agents, different questions. Hope Gardner stood outside on the sidewalk, watching through the window. A crowd had gathered, 30, 40 people, townspeople who'd come to see what 15 motorcycles outside the Iron Mule meant. For the first time in 14 months, every single one of them was looking at her. Not through her. At her. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She'd earned this. The FBI took Wade and Braddock in separate vehicles. The crowd watched them go. 2 men in handcuffs, loaded into the back seats of black SUVs, driven away without sirens. Quiet. Final. The townspeople lingered for a while, murmuring to each other, glancing at Hope, then drifting back to their shops and houses, the way people do when they've witnessed something they don't yet know how to talk about. By late afternoon, the gas station parking lot was almost empty. Most of the bikers were checking their bikes, recalculating the route to Memphis. The detour would add 3 hours, but nobody complained. 3 hours was better than a 30-foot drop into Miller Creek. Hank found Hope sitting on the curb behind Conley's, her back against the wall, Craig's leather gloves folded neatly in her lap. She was staring at nothing in particular, the kind of stare that comes after adrenaline burns off and exhaustion takes its place. He sat down next to her, didn't ask permission, just lowered himself onto the curb like a man who'd done this before, sat with someone who needed company more than conversation. For a while, neither of them spoke. "Where'd you grow up?" Hank asked, finally. "Here, Birch Lane, 2 blocks from the church." "Parents?" "My grandmother raised me, Eleanor. She passed 14 months ago." Hope's voice was matter-of-fact, no self-pity, just the shape of things. "Mom left when I was 3, never met my father." "Eleanor sounds like a good woman. She was the best person I ever knew." Hope paused. "She used to read to me every night until I could read faster than her. Then I'd read to her. She'd fall asleep in her chair, and I'd put a blanket on her and keep going." Hank smiled at that. A real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. "What happened after she passed?" "Bank took the house. 60 days. Hope picked at a thread on the gloves. "I tried the shelter in Colton. Full. Tried the church here. Pastor Lewis said he'd pray for me. I figured if prayer worked that well, Pastor Lewis wouldn't need a salary." Hank let out a short laugh. Hope looked up, surprised, like she'd forgotten she could make people laugh. "So you ended up under the bridge," Hank said. 11 months. It's not bad in summer. Winter was rough. I lined the walls with cardboard and plastic sheeting. Earl, he runs the repair shop on Route 4, he gave me a sleeping bag in December and a flashlight for reading." "You still read?" "Every day. I go to the county library on Tuesdays and Fridays when they're open. Mrs. Patterson lets me stay until closing. I've read everything on the 3rd floor twice." "What do you read?" "Everything. History, mostly. And science. I finished a book about bridge engineering last month. Ironic, right?" A small smile crossed her face. The first one Hank had seen. "I like knowing how things work, how things hold together. I used to think if I understood enough about the world, maybe I could figure out where I fit in it." Hank felt something tighten in his chest. He'd commanded platoons of Marines. He'd carried men out of burning vehicles. But sitting on this curb, Listening to a 19-year-old girl talk about reading engineering books under a bridge by flashlight, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Shame. Not for himself, for every system, every person, every town that had let this happen. Hank was quiet for a long time. He rubbed his jaw, stared at the ground, then looked at her.
How far'd you get in school?
11th grade. I had to drop out after Eleanor died. No permanent address means no enrollment. No enrollment means no transcript. No transcript means no future. Yeah, I've heard that math before. Hank's voice was rough, not from anger, from recognition. I had a buddy, Jamie Torres, did 2 tours with me in Helmand. When he came home, the VA lost his paperwork. Couldn't get benefits, couldn't get housing, couldn't get a job. System just swallowed him. What happened to him? Hank didn't answer right away. He looked at the sky, pale orange now, the sun dropping toward the tree line. He didn't make it, Hank said. And every day I think about what would have been different if someone had just stopped and listened. Hope looked at him. For a moment, neither of them was a biker or a homeless girl. They were just 2 people who understood what it felt like to be invisible in a country that promised it saw everyone. Hank stood up. He extended his hand. Hope took it, calloused palm against calloused palm, and he pulled her to her feet. "Stay here," he said. He walked to the center of the parking lot where the 14 other riders were gathered. They saw his face and went quiet. "We're not leaving tonight," Hank said. "Memphis?" Craig asked. "Memphis can wait. We've got something to do here first." 14 men looked at him, then at Hope, then back at Hank. Nobody argued. They set up camp in the empty lot behind Conley's gas station. Tommy Conley didn't object, partly because Hank asked politely, partly because 15 veterans on motorcycles don't really need permission. Tents went up in 20 minutes, military precision. Bedrolls, coolers, tool bags, arranged in a tight circle like a forward operating base. Craig built a fire pit from cinder blocks he found behind the hardware store. By sunset, the lot looked less like a parking lot and more like a mission, because that's what it was. Day 1, Hank made phone calls. He sat on an overturned bucket with a spiral notebook and his phone and didn't move for 4 hours. He called the Veterans Motorcycle Alliance in Atlanta. He called the Wounded Warriors Project. He called 3 former Marine captains he'd served with who now ran construction firms. He called a journalist at the Macon Telegraph. By nightfall, a GoFundMe page titled Hope's Bridge had been shared 600 times. Day 2, the work began. Sam surveyed the Millbrook Bridge at dawn and drew up a repair plan in his notebook. Materials, load calculations, structural sequence. He walked into Peterson's Hardware on Main Street, slapped a handwritten list on the counter, and said, "I need all of this by noon. We're fixing the bridge your town let someone destroy." Old Mr. Peterson didn't charge them a cent. The bikers split into crews, 4 on demolition, removing the damaged beams with torches and winches, 4 on fabrication, cutting new steel supports from donated I-beams that arrived on a flatbed from Atlanta that afternoon, 4 on installation, and 3 on what Craig called community relations, which mostly meant standing at the bridge approach and explaining to curious townspeople what was happening and why. Hope worked alongside them. She hauled tools, ran water, held flashlights while Sam checked measurements. Nobody told her to. Nobody told her not to. She just showed up at dawn on the second day, wearing Craig's gloves, and didn't leave until dark. On the third day, something shifted. Earl Weston arrived at 7 in the morning. He drove his battered pickup to the bridge, got out, opened the tailgate, and unloaded every tool he owned.
Figured you could use an extra set of hands, he said to Hank. We could use about 20, Hank replied. Earl smiled. Give it an hour. He was right. By 8 o'clock, 5 more locals had showed up. By 9, 12. By noon, the bridge site looked like a barn raising. People who hadn't spoken to each other in months working side by side, passing beams, holding ladders, sharing thermoses of coffee. Mrs. Calloway arrived at 1 in the afternoon. She came in her station wagon with the back seat folded down, loaded with sandwiches, bottled water, apples, and granola bars. She set up a folding table under a tree and started feeding everyone. She didn't look at Hope right away. She arranged food. She wiped the table. She fussed with napkins. And then she walked over to where Hope was kneeling on the bridge deck, holding a bolt steady while Sam tightened it from below. Hope! Hope looked up. Mrs. Calloway stood there with a sandwich in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. Her eyes were red. I chased you out of my store, she said. In the rain. You were cold, and I chased you out. Hope didn't say anything. I'm sorry. Mrs. Calloway's voice broke on the second word. I'm so sorry. Hope took the sandwich. Thank you, Mrs. Calloway. That was all. No speech, no dramatic forgiveness scene, just a sandwich, accepted quietly, the way Eleanor would have wanted it. Day 4. Day 5. The bridge grew stronger with every hour. New beams, reinforced joints, fresh concrete on the abutments. Sam inspected every connection twice and signed off on the structural integrity with a stamp he'd kept from his Navy days. On the evening of the 5th day, Hank stood on the completed bridge and made a phone call. Then he gathered the group, bikers and townspeople together, and said 6 words. The bridge is done. We're not.
Nobody asked what he meant. They'd all been watching the GoFundMe page climb. It had passed $100,000 2 days ago. This morning, it crossed $127,000. And Hank had a plan for every penny. On the morning of the 6th day, Hank told Hope they were going for a walk. She didn't ask where. She'd learned that Hank didn't explain things until he was ready. So she pulled on Craig's gloves and followed him down Main Street.
The town felt different. People were out. A man Hope had never spoken to nodded from across the street and said, "Morning, Hope." She almost tripped. Hank turned onto Birch Lane. Hope's stomach dropped. She hadn't walked down this street since the bank took Eleanor's house. She'd avoided it the way you avoid a grave when the wound is fresh. Not because you've forgotten, but because remembering too clearly is its own violence. At the end of the block, 412 Birch Lane, Hope stopped walking. The porch that had been sagging was level now, new boards pale against weathered siding. The roof had been replaced with fresh gray shingles. Eleanor's porch swing was still there, but the chains were new. The front door had been painted a bright sky blue. "What is this?" Hope whispered. Hank walked up the steps and opened the door. Inside smelled like fresh paint and sawdust. The floors were sanded and sealed. The kitchen had new countertops, simple laminate, nothing fancy, but clean. The living room had a couch, a bookshelf, and a reading lamp. The bookshelf was full. "The books came from the county library," Hank said. "Mrs. Patterson picked them out. She said she knew what you'd want." Hope touched the shelf. Her fingers trembled. She walked to the back bedroom. On the nightstand sat a framed photograph, Eleanor Gardner. Sitting in the old porch swing, smiling, holding a glass of sweet tea. "Earl found it at the pawn shop on Jefferson," Hank said. "Someone sold off a box of things from the house after the bank cleared it. Earl bought the whole box. He'd been keeping it in his shop for a year." Hope picked up the photograph. She held it with both hands, the way you hold something that might dissolve if you squeeze too tight. She sat on the bed, pressed the frame to her chest, and she cried.
Not the silent tears from the gas station, not the stifled grief she'd carried for 14 months. This was the kind of crying that comes when a wall finally breaks. Loud, gasping sobs that shook her shoulders and made it impossible to speak. Hank stood in the doorway and said nothing. He'd seen this before. The moment someone who's been surviving realizes they don't have to anymore. When she finally looked up, eyes swollen, face streaked, she asked one question.
Why? You don't even know me. I know enough, Hank said. I know you ran 2 miles barefoot to save 15 strangers. I know you didn't give up when everyone told you to. And I know my buddy Jamie didn't make it because nobody stopped for him. He paused. I'm stopping for you. Outside, Birch Lane was full of people. Half the town stood in the street, on sidewalks, on lawns. The 15 bikers lined the curb, helmets off. Danny Wells stood at the end of the row, arms crossed, grinning. Vic Holloway had his hand over his heart. Children sat on their father's shoulders to see over the crowd. An old woman Hope didn't recognize was holding a hand-painted sign that read, "Welcome home, Hope." Someone had strung a banner between 2 oak trees across the street. White sheet, black spray paint, crooked letters. Grayville stands with Hope Gardner. It wasn't professional. It wasn't pretty. It was perfect. Hope walked to the porch and looked out. Her knees almost buckled. The new mayor stepped forward, Claire Ashworth, elected 3 days ago after Braddock's arrest triggered a special council session. Hope, Claire said, on behalf of the Grayville Town Council, I'm announcing the Eleanor Gardner Community Fund. Emergency housing, meals, and educational support for anyone in this town who needs it. She held out an envelope. Hope walked down the steps and took it. Full scholarship to Walker County Community College. Tuition, books, housing stipend. Funded by the Veterans Motorcycle Alliance and matched by the state of Georgia. Hope looked up at the crowd. Mrs. Calloway had her hand over her mouth. Earl stood near the back, arms folded, smiling. Tommy Conley was wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Hank spoke, not to Hope, but to everyone. She saved 15 lives with nothing but courage. The least we can do is make sure she never sleeps under a bridge again. The applause started everywhere at once. Clapping, cheering, rolling down Birch Lane and echoing off the houses. Someone whistled. Someone shouted her name. Hope Gardner stood on the porch of 412 Birch Lane, holding a photograph of her grandmother in one hand and a letter to her future in the other. Not concrete, not gravel, not mud. Home. 6 months later, Hope Gardner sat in the front row of a lecture hall at Walker County Community College. Notebook open, pen moving, hand raised before the professor finished the question. She carried her books in a canvas bag Sam Porter had mailed from Virginia, the same one he'd used in the Navy. Inside the front pocket, she kept Earl's flashlight. She didn't need it anymore. She kept it anyway. On weekends, Hope volunteered at the Grayville Community Shelter, a converted storefront on Main Street that hadn't existed 6 months ago. The Eleanor Gardner Fund opened it in October, staffed by volunteers, funded by donations that still trickled in from across the country. Nobody in Grayville slept outside anymore. Mrs. Calloway ran the shelter's kitchen. She'd closed her grocery store on Sundays to cook there. Pot roast, cornbread, peach cobbler. She never talked about the day she'd chased Hope out with a broom. She didn't need to. Everyone saw what she did now. Earl still left brown paper bags on the bridge railing. Old habit. Except now they were addressed to whoever might need them. Sometimes they came back with a thank you note tucked inside. The Iron Oath Brotherhood passed through Grayville twice a year, spring and fall. 15 Harleys down Main Street, chrome flashing, engines low. Instead of locked doors and nervous stares, they got waves, handshakes, cold lemonade on Mrs. Calloway's porch. Hank always stopped at 412 Birch Lane first. He'd sit on the porch swing with Hope, and they'd talk about school, about books, about Jamie, about what it means to be seen. The Millbrook Bridge had a new sign bolted to the east railing, Hope's Bridge, because one voice was enough. Tommy Conley said it best. A reporter from Atlanta asked what had changed in Grayville, and Tommy said, "I guess we finally learned that the person you ignore might be the person who saves your life." That's the story. A homeless girl, 15 bikers, and a bridge that almost killed them all. But here's what I want you to think about. Who's the Hope Gardner in your town? Who's the person everyone walks past? Who's sleeping somewhere they shouldn't have to, knowing something nobody wants to hear? Drop a comment. Tell me, because I promise you, she's out there. If this story hit you the way it hit me, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications. Stories like this don't get told enough. Bro, a girl with nothing just gave everything. Imagine that's you. No home, no family, the whole town ignoring you, and you still choose to save people. If that don't make you feel something, I don't know what will.